The Senate confirmation hearing room was filled to capacity on a cold January morning in 2025. Howard Lutnick, billionaire CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald and President Trump's nominee for Commerce Secretary, sat at the witness table radiating his trademark Wall Street confidence in a perfectly tailored suit. For 3 hours, he had fielded questions about his business practices, plans for American commerce, and his loyalty to the administration. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, until Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas entered the room. What transpired over the next 30 minutes would send shockwaves through Wall Street, jeopardize Lutnick's confirmation, and uncover financial links that few had anticipated. Known for her sharp questioning and fearless approach, Crockett carried a manila folder that would soon change the tone of the hearing. As she took her seat and adjusted her microphone, Lutnick's expression stiffened. Her composed gaze and faint, knowing smile caused his hands to tighten on the table's edge. "Mr. Lutnick," Crockett began, her voice steady and direct, "I have some questions about your company's activities that the American public deserves answers to. Before delving deeper, it's worth understanding who these two figures were. Howard Lutnick wasn't just another executive. He was a survivor who rebuilt Cantor Fitzgerald after losing 658 employees, including his own brother, during the September 11th attacks. For more than 3 decades, he had navigated the complexities of global finance, transforming tragedy into a multi-billion-dollar empire. His firm handled roughly a quarter of all transactions in the vast U.S. Treasury market. When Trump nominated him, Wall Street cheered. One of their own was heading to Washington. At 63, Lutnick was a seasoned veteran of congressional hearings, meticulously prepared by a team of lawyers and advisors. With a Republican Senate majority and bipartisan goodwill stemming from his philanthropic work, his confirmation appeared inevitable. Jasmine Crockett, however, was no ordinary lawmaker. At 43, the Dallas-born former civil rights attorney had earned a reputation in the Texas legislature for her uncompromising questioning and her refusal to back down from powerful figures. When she arrived in Congress, insiders dismissed her as another outspoken progressive, unlikely to make an impact. They misjudged her entirely. Crockett specialized in financial crime and corporate misconduct, with a sharp eye for inconsistencies in complex filings. While most lawmakers delegated research to staff, she spent late nights studying SEC reports and analyzing trade data herself. Weeks before the hearing, she had identified an unusual pattern: trades connecting Cantor Fitzgerald to offshore entities that didn't quite align. Her advisors warned her of the risks, but Crockett had built her career on taking principled stands no matter the odds. For Lutnick, the hearing represented the pinnacle of his career, a final step towards cementing his legacy beyond Wall Street. For Crockett, it was a test of accountability and integrity in public office. Neither anticipated that what followed would expose something far larger than either of them. As Crockett opened her folder, the room fell silent. Camera phones went up, C-SPAN zoomed in, and journalists leaned forward in anticipation. "Mr. Lutnick," she began, "can you tell us about Cantor Fitzgerald's Treasury trading volumes in the third quarter of 2024? Relaxed, Lutnick replied smoothly that his firm had facilitated around $2 to $3 trillion in transactions, consistent with historical averages. "Consistent with historical averages?" Crockett repeated thoughtfully. "That's interesting, because the data I have shows unusual spikes in your trading volumes on specific dates that coincide with major Federal Reserve announcements." Lutnick's jaw tightened. "Representative, all our trading activities are fully legal and transparent under strict regulatory oversight." "I'm not questioning legality," Crockett countered, pulling out a chart. "I'm questioning timing, and who knew what, and when." Displaying the chart to cameras, she noted that these trading spikes occurred exactly 24 to 48 hours before key Fed policy decisions, 17 times in 6 months. Murmurs rippled across the room. Lutnick's lawyer whispered frantically, but he waved him off. A sheen of sweat appeared on his temple. "Market participants often adjust positions based on legitimate analysis," he said defensively. "Legitimate analysis," Crockett repeated. "Are you familiar with a company called Meridian Capital Holdings, registered in the Cayman Islands?" Color drained from Lutnick's face. "I need to check our records," he stammered. We deal with many counterparties. Let me refresh your memory, Crockett said, her voice sharpening. Meridian Capital Holdings, established March 2024, participated in those same unusual treasury trades. And that account was opened just 2 weeks after your private dinner with several Federal Reserve officials. A Republican committee member tried to intervene, reminding her that the purpose was to review Lutnick's qualifications, not conduct an investigation. Without breaking eye contact, Crockett responded, "With respect, Senator, the American people deserve to know if their prospective Commerce Secretary has exploited insider information to influence Treasury markets." She then produced a photo. This was taken at the St. Regis Hotel, New York, March 15, 2024. Can you identify the individuals? Lutnick hesitated, his composure slipping. "I attend many dinners," he replied weakly. Crockett leaned in. "On your right is Jerome Patterson, Senior Advisor at the Federal Reserve. Across from you, Linda Chen, Head of the Fed's Market Operations Desk. And next to her, Michael Thornton, Managing Director of Meridian Capital Holdings." Gasps filled the room. Reporters typed furiously as the chairman called for order. Lutnick's attorney requested a recess, but Crockett pressed on. "Before you do, one final question. Can you explain why Meridian Capital Holdings transferred $47 million to a political action committee supporting your nomination just 3 days after your most profitable Treasury trade?" Chaos erupted. Senators shouted, photographers surged forward, and the once confident CEO sat frozen, speechless. The chairman demanded order, while Crockett calmly placed her folder on the desk. "All documentation is here. SEC filings, bank records, FOIA obtained emails. Copies have been provided to each committee member." As staff distributed the evidence, Lutnick finally spoke, voice cracking. This is a distortion. These are legitimate business relationships. Representative Crockett is manufacturing a scandal." "Then you'll have no problem explaining them under oath," she replied coolly. "Unless you'd prefer to invoke your Fifth Amendment rights." The air in the room grew heavy. Everyone understood the stakes. Pleading the Fifth would end his nomination, but continuing risked perjury if she had more evidence. Lutnick's attorney seized the microphone. "Mr. Chairman, given these new allegations, we request a recess until tomorrow to review the documents and prepare an appropriate response." The visibly uneasy chairman nodded, adjourning the hearing as cameras continued flashing, capturing the moment that could redefine both political and financial power in Washington. "The committee will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Mr. Lutnick, you remain under oath." As the gavel struck, Howard Lutnick sank into his chair. The once confident Wall Street figure who had entered the room 3 hours earlier was gone. In his place sat a man watching the foundation of his reputation begin to crumble. Representative Jasmine Crockett gathered her papers with deliberate calm, ensuring the cameras caught every movement. Her objective was clear. She had successfully planted the seeds of doubt that would soon grow into a major scandal. The following morning, the hearing room was even more crowded. Top news outlets had dispatched their leading correspondents. Overnight, the story had exploded across social media under hashtags like #Lutnickgate and Crockett Expose. Financial markets were uneasy, with Cantor Fitzgerald's partners reportedly holding emergency meetings through the night. Lutnick returned to the witness table looking weary and tense. His usually polished appearance was disheveled. Dark circles framed his eyes. His legal team had more than doubled overnight, an acknowledgement that this was no longer just about a confirmation hearing, but potential criminal exposure. Crockett entered the room composed as ever. She had anticipated that Lutnick's attorneys would spend the night preparing counter-arguments. What they didn't know was that she had held back her strongest evidence for this very moment. The chairman called the session to order, his tone tired. "Mr. Lutnick, you've had the opportunity to review the materials presented by Representative Crockett. Do you have a response?" Lutnick leaned into the microphone, voice steadier than the previous day. "Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I categorically deny any wrongdoing. The documents presented were taken out of context. Yes, I know several Federal Reserve officials personally. That's not unusual in my position. Meridian Capital is one of many counterparties we do business with, and their political contribution falls within their constitutional rights. There is absolutely no improper connection between these events." His phrasing was cautious and calculated, clearly the product of overnight coaching. Some Republican senators nodded approvingly. For a brief moment, it seemed possible that he might recover control of the narrative. Then Crockett spoke. "Thank you, Mr. Lutnick. However, I'm afraid you've left me no choice but to share additional information that came to light last night." The room fell silent. Lutnick's hands tightened on the table. "After yesterday's hearing," Crockett continued evenly, "I received a call from a whistleblower inside Cantor Fitzgerald, someone with direct access to internal communications who was deeply concerned about what they had seen." Lutnick's lead attorney immediately objected. "Mr. Chairman, this is irregular. We cannot verify the credibility of any alleged whistleblower." The chairman hesitated. "Representative Crockett, do you have documentation?" "I do," she replied, producing a tablet. "These are internal emails from Cantor Fitzgerald's servers. Here's one dated March 16th, 2024, the day after the dinner mentioned yesterday. It's from Mr. Lutnick to his head of trading. Quote, 'Move everything to Meridian for the next Fed play. Patterson says it'll be bigger than expected. Delete this after reading.' End quote. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions as senators rose from their seats. Lutnick turned pale. "That's fabricated," he yelled, losing his composure. "Those emails are fake." Crockett remained composed. "Mr. Lutnick, these emails include full metadata and can be independently verified. But if you insist they're false, I assume you won't object to a forensic review of your company's servers by the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit." The tension was palpable. Agreeing would invite an investigation. Refusing would imply guilt. Either path led to ruin. His attorney leaned forward to intervene. "Mr. Chairman, we need a moment to confer with our client." But Crockett pressed on. "While you do that, I'll share one more email. This one's from Michael Thornton at Meridian Capital. Quote, "Howard says the Fed will move 50 basis points, not 25. Position accordingly. Our arrangement continues to be profitable for all parties." End quote. She locked eyes with Lutnick. "That Federal Reserve decision wasn't public yet. It wouldn't be announced for another 48 hours. How did you know?" Lutnick wiped sweat from his brow. "We make educated guesses based on economic indicators," he said weakly. "Educated guesses?" Crockett repeated, lifting another document. "This is a trading record showing Meridian Capital made $312 million on that single trade. Information that allegedly came from you." "That's quite the guess, Mr. Lutnick." She turned toward the committee. "What we're seeing here could represent the largest insider trading case involving Federal Reserve data in U.S. history, billions in profits earned from confidential information, giving select firms an unfair advantage over the market." A senior Democratic senator finally spoke. "Mr. Lutnick, in light of these serious allegations, do you wish to continue your nomination?" Lutnick glanced at his lawyers, who whispered urgently. The silence stretched for several long seconds before he finally spoke. "Mr. Chairman, I need to consult with counsel before proceeding." But Crockett wasn't done. "Before you decide, there's one more document," she said, holding up a final sheet. "This is a sworn affidavit from Jerome Patterson, the Federal Reserve advisor you dined with. He has agreed to cooperate with investigators in exchange for immunity. He's prepared to testify about the entire operation." The room went still. Lutnick slumped in his chair, defeated. His attorneys surrounded him in quiet panic, but the outcome was already clear. The chairman, visibly unsettled, addressed the room. "Given the gravity of these allegations and the evidence presented, I am suspending this hearing pending a full investigation by the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission." Lutnick's attorney made one last effort. "Mr. Chairman, we object to this rush to judgment. My client deserves the opportunity to respond in due process," the chairman replied firmly. "He will have that opportunity in federal court." As security officers approached to escort him out, Lutnick was not yet under arrest, but the inevitability hung heavy in the air. He turned toward Crockett, their eyes meeting briefly. The billionaire who had once considered himself untouchable had been brought low by a freshman congresswoman no one had expected to challenge him. And as the room buzzed with chaos and flashing cameras, Representative Jasmine Crockett spoke one final time, her steady voice cutting through the noise. "Mr. Lutnick, throughout your career, you believed you were untouchable, too powerful, too connected to ever face real accountability. But today, the American people witnessed that no individual, not even a Wall Street billionaire, stands above the law. Cameras captured every moment. Lutnick being escorted out, his legal team rushing behind him, senators gathering in urgent discussion, and Representative Jasmine Crockett quietly organizing her papers, the crucial manila folder that had changed everything tucked securely under her arm. Within minutes of the hearing's suspension, the financial world descended into turmoil. Trading in Cantor Fitzgerald bonds was frozen. Analysts slashed the firm's estimated valuation, even though it wasn't publicly traded. CNBC interrupted its regular programming with a bold, breaking news banner flashing across screens. The first report came from a financial journalist who had witnessed it all firsthand. History made, Representative Jasmine Crockett just ended. Howard Lutnick's nomination, and likely his career, in one of the most devastating congressional takedowns I've ever seen. Criminal charges expected. This is Enron-level massive. Within an hour, your Crockett takedown had become the top trending topic worldwide. Short clips from the hearing, Lutnick's stunned reaction as the emails were read, his shaky denials, and the shocking revelation about a cooperating witness circulated online, racking up millions of views. News outlets scrambled to bring in financial crime experts to explain the massive implications for Wall Street. The response was swift and severe. Sources inside Cantor Fitzgerald confirmed that an emergency board meeting had been called. Partners demanded Lutnick's immediate resignation, while anxious clients began pulling their accounts. The same firm that had once survived the aftermath of 9/11 was now facing a potential collapse from within. Political consequences followed just as quickly. The White House, which had backed Lutnick's nomination only a day earlier, issued a brief statement. The President has accepted Mr. Lutnick's withdrawal from consideration for Commerce Secretary. We expect all nominees to uphold the highest ethical standards. Yet the crisis was only beginning. Within 3 hours of the hearing's conclusion, FBI agents executed search warrants at Cantor Fitzgerald's New York offices. Cameras caught agents carrying boxes of files and computer drives out of the building. The Southern District of New York, well known for prosecuting high-profile financial crimes, announced a full investigation. Soon, more whistleblowers emerged. A senior trader at Cantor Fitzgerald contacted the New York Times, offering recordings of internal meetings where the scheme had been discussed. A former employee reached out to the Wall Street Journal with documents suggesting the conspiracy stretched back even further than what Crockett had initially revealed. The collapse of this financial empire was happening at an unprecedented pace. Jerome Patterson, the Federal Reserve advisor who had agreed to cooperate, granted an exclusive interview to 60 Minutes, set to air that Sunday. Leaked excerpts from the interview exposed a deep-rooted culture of corruption that had spread across the upper echelons of Wall Street and even touched parts of the Federal Reserve. It began innocently, Patterson explained. Just friends exchanging what we called educated guesses. But it evolved into something far worse, something that violated every core value of fair and transparent markets. The SEC soon announced an expansion of its probe, widening its focus beyond Cantor Fitzgerald. Every transaction conducted by Meridian Capital was now under review. Other firms that had shown similar trading patterns were being subpoenaed as well. What began as scrutiny over one man's nomination had now erupted into the biggest financial scandal in decades. For Representative Jasmine Crockett, the transformation was profound. Her work had not only exposed corruption at the highest levels, but had also reshaped the national conversation about accountability and ethics in American finance. The congresswoman who had entered that hearing room as a relatively unknown freshman representative was now being celebrated as a national hero. Messages of appreciation flooded her office from citizens across the country. Civil rights groups commended her bravery, and financial reform advocates hailed her as a defender of market integrity. There was even discussion about her leading a new congressional committee on financial oversight. In her interview with CNN that evening, Representative Jasmine Crockett remained characteristically composed. "This isn't about party politics or personal agendas," she said firmly. "It's about ensuring that our financial markets are fair and that insider information isn't used to benefit a few at the cost of everyone else. What we uncovered today is only the beginning." When asked how she had discovered the scheme, she smiled modestly and replied, I did what any good lawyer would do. I followed the money. And money always tells a story. In this case, it told one of greed, corruption, and betrayal of public trust. The interview went viral within hours, viewed by millions. Crockett's social media following skyrocketed, gaining over 500,000 new followers in a single day. Invitations poured in from every major news network, publishers offered book deals, and producers proposed documentaries. Yet she turned down most offers, saying simply that there was still work to be done. Meanwhile, Howard Lutnick's downfall was complete. By evening, he had resigned as CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, the company he had led for decades. His attorneys released a statement maintaining his innocence, but admitting that stepping aside was necessary for the sake of the firm and its employees. Behind closed doors, insiders reported he was negotiating a cooperation deal with prosecutors in an attempt to avoid prison. The consequences reached far beyond one company. Other nominees for federal positions began withdrawing their names, wary of similar scrutiny. Congress quickly began drafting new legislation to bar Federal Reserve officials from interacting privately with market participants. Calls for comprehensive reform of financial regulation echoed across Washington. Online, the debate was fierce. Financial experts argued over whether this was an isolated case or evidence of deeper systemic corruption. Some defended insider access as part of efficient market operations, while others demanded sweeping changes, including full transparency of Federal Reserve meetings. Memes spread rapidly, using Lutnick's shocked expression from the hearing as the Lutnick face for public humiliation. Edits appeared showing Crockett as a comic book-style hero, taking down corrupt financiers. The term Crockett Doctrine became shorthand for firm congressional oversight and accountability. Legal analysts weighed in on potential criminal charges facing Lutnick and his associates: insider trading, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit securities fraud. The potential penalties were severe. A former federal prosecutor estimated that, if convicted on all counts, Lutnick could face up to 30 years in prison. The scale of financial misconduct was staggering. Investigators estimated the scheme had generated over $3 billion in illegal profits across 2 years. Every trade involved would need to be reviewed, profits reclaimed, and legal action taken by disadvantaged traders already filing lawsuits. Cantor Fitzgerald faced the possibility of fines large enough to threaten its survival. 3 days after the hearing, the first arrests were made. Michael Thornton of Meridian Capital was detained at JFK Airport while attempting to board a flight to Dubai. 2 senior executives at Cantor Fitzgerald were taken into custody at their homes. News broadcasts ran continuous footage of the defendants being led into federal court in handcuffs. 1 week later, Jasmine Crockett stood before a packed press. Room to announce new legislation, the Market Integrity Act. The bill proposed stricter penalties for insider trading involving government information, mandated public logs of all meetings between regulators and market players, and established an independent office to investigate financial crimes. What we uncovered in that hearing wasn't just a violation of law, she said. It was a betrayal of the fundamental promise of our financial system, that markets should be fair and transparent. This bill ensures that what happened here will never happen again. The proposal gained bipartisan support, rare in today's polarized Congress. Even senators who had once backed Lutnick's nomination now publicly praised Crockett's efforts. No politician wanted to appear lenient toward Wall Street misconduct. As the investigations progressed, more shocking details emerged. Prosecutors revealed that at least 12 major financial institutions and over 30 individuals were implicated. The corruption extended beyond the Federal Reserve, involving insider access to Treasury Department decisions, SEC enforcement actions, and even upcoming congressional legislation. Howard Lutnick, once one of the most powerful figures on Wall Street, was indicted on 17 counts of securities fraud, conspiracy, and lying to federal agents. His mugshot, a stark contrast to his confident magazine portraits, became a lasting image of Wall Street arrogance brought to justice. Though he pleaded not guilty, Few believed he could overcome the evidence and witnesses Crockett's team had assembled. The trials were expected to last years, but in the public eye, the verdict was already clear. Lutnick was guilty, Crockett was the hero, and the long-standing alliance between Washington and Wall Street had been publicly exposed. Ironically, the scandal prompted widespread calls for exactly the reforms that a Commerce Secretary like Lutnick would likely have resisted: tighter regulations on trading, greater transparency in government economic decisions, and stronger penalties for financial misconduct. For Jasmine Crockett, the moment was transformative. She had walked into that hearing room armed only with determination and a folder of evidence, and changed the course of American finance. Her book, Following the Money: How We Exposed Wall Street's Biggest Scandal, became an instant bestseller. Yet she remained focused on her mission. In a 60 Minutes interview 6 months later, when asked what motivated her to take on someone as powerful as Howard Lutnick, she replied, "It wasn't about taking him on. It was about doing my job. The American people elected me to provide oversight, to ask tough questions, and to ensure that government serves everyone, not just the wealthy and connected." When asked whether she feared retaliation from Wall Street, she smiled. "Fear is a luxury we can't afford when democracy is at risk. Besides, what's the worst they can do? They already underestimated me once. I doubt they'll make that mistake again." The interview concluded with the host asking what lay ahead for the now famous Congresswoman. Crockett's response was steady. "The same as always, the work. There are more Howard Lutnicks out there, more corruption to expose. My job is to find them. The American people deserve nothing less." As cameras pulled back, showing Crockett in her congressional office, walls lined with supportive letters, and framed newspaper headlines, one thing was undeniable. The balance of power between Wall Street and Washington had shifted, however slightly. It had shifted because one determined representative chose to ask the questions others avoided, to follow the evidence, and to challenge power when it mattered most. Financial markets eventually stabilized. Cantor Fitzgerald survived under new leadership and tighter regulation. New safeguards were introduced to prevent future abuse. But the true legacy of that January hearing was not in the policies that followed. It was the message it sent. No one is untouchable. In an era of heightened scrutiny and fearless lawmakers, like Jasmine Crockett, even the most powerful could fall. 8 months later, Howard Lutnick's trial concluded. He was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. As he was escorted away in shackles, news networks replayed the iconic moment when Crockett first revealed that manila folder, the instant everything changed. It became one of the defining images of modern American politics, the moment truth triumphed over power, and when a freshman congresswoman brought down a Wall Street giant. But Jasmine Crockett had already moved on, to the next case, the next investigation, the next fight for accountability. Because as she had proven, with enough resolve, preparation, and courage, anyone can be held accountable. Even a billionaire, even on Wall Street, even in America. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss our next in-depth political story. Comment below, do you believe more Howard Lutnicks are still out there waiting to be exposed? What other power struggles or investigations would you like us to cover next? Like this video if you believe in transparency, and share it to remind others that in a true democracy, the people always have the final say.